My name is Miriam Kessler. I'm 66 years old. And for most of my life, I've believed that patience could mend anything rifts, pride, even silence. Maybe that's why, when the phone rang that Wednesday morning, and I saw my son's name flash on the screen, my hands trembled like I was about to open a gift I'd waited years for. "Mom," Evan said, his voice unusually warm. "Come early this Saturday. We're going to celebrate you." It had been months since he'd called for anything other than a tax question or a favor. Behind him, I heard Paige's quick, bright tone. "We've got something special planned. Don't be late for a moment." I couldn't speak. I looked around my small Charleston bungalow, the same house where I'd raised Evan after his father's death. The afternoon light fell across the framed photos on the mantel birthdays, graduations, moments when we'd still felt like a team. "Of course," I finally said. "I'll be there." After I hung up, I stood at the window watching the moss sway in the oaks outside, trying to quiet the ache in my chest. Maybe this was the beginning of something good. Paige was sharp-tongued but ambitious. Perhaps she was learning kindness. And Evan, well, maybe he'd realized that time doesn't wait for apologies. That evening, I pulled my green dress from the closet, the one I'd bought 20 years ago for Evan's college graduation. I pressed it carefully, smoothing the wrinkles with the palm of my hand. The fabric still smelled faintly of cedar from the chest I kept it in. I fixed my hair, dabbed on the light perfume I saved for Sundays, and set my purse by the door. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel so quiet. I went to bed imagining laughter, clinking glasses, my son's hand resting gently over mine. I didn't know that by Saturday night, that same hand would tremble for an entirely different reason. Saturday evening came wrapped in a golden light that made Charleston's waterfront shimmer. I arrived 15 minutes early, as always, smoothing the skirt of my green dress before stepping out of the taxi. The restaurant was grander than I expected, crystal chandeliers glinting through tall windows, waiters in pressed white shirts carrying trays that looked like silver mirrors. For a moment, pride swelled in my chest. My son could afford a place like this. Maybe the distance between us had been worth something after all. A young hostess greeted me with a practiced smile. "Good evening. Ma'am. Name? Please, Miriam Kessler." My son reserved a table, Evan and Paige Langley. Her expression flickered. She glanced toward the dining room, then reached under the counter and handed me a small laminated card attached to a lanyard. "Please wear this, ma'am. It's for seating purposes." Across the front, printed in neat capital letters, were two words: "Limited guest." I hesitated. There must be a mistake before I could finish. I heard Paige's voice ring out from across the room. "Mom, you made it." She was already filming on her phone, that bright, polished smile fixed for the camera. Evan stood beside her, grinning awkwardly. I walked toward them, the badge dangling against my chest. Paige reached over, tapped it with one manicured finger. "Oh, don't look so serious. Miriam, it's just for fun. You can still sit and drink water." "Right." Evan chuckled weakly, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, Mom, relax. You're part of the celebration." A few nearby diners turned their heads. Curiosity mingled with discomfort. The waiter who'd been guiding me looked away, pretending to adjust the table setting. My cheeks burned, but I forced a small smile and sat down. The table gleamed with polished silver, 3 wine glasses per setting, plates already lined with appetizers. Yet in front of me, there was only an empty water glass. I folded my napkins slowly, my fingers trembling. Paige leaned closer. "Still recording. See, Mom, you finally got your special night." The laughter that followed felt sharp enough to cut through the hum of conversation. Outside the window, the tide began to rise. brushing softly against the docked boats, steady, indifferent, as if it had seen this kind of cruelty before. The dinner plates were cleared almost as soon as they were served, replaced by a glossy folder that Paige slid across the table toward me. The chatter around us dimmed under the weight of her sudden seriousness. "Mom," she began, her tone sugary but rehearsed. "We've been meaning to talk to you about something important. Evan and I have been worried about you living alone at your age, managing all those bills. So, we took the liberty of preparing some documents to help streamline things." I glanced at Evan, but he only looked down, tracing the rim of his glass with one finger. Paige opened the folder, revealing neat stacks of paper covered in small print and notarized stamps. "These are just basic authorizations," she said lightly. "Power of attorney, property transfer, simple legal stuff. It'll make it easier for us to handle things on your behalf. Pay taxes, maintain your home. You won't have to worry about a thing." Her manicured nail tapped on one line near the top. My name appeared again and again, followed by theirs. I felt my throat tighten. Evan finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost apologetic. "We also found a wonderful retirement place outside Mount Pleasant. It's private, secure, really beautiful. You'd have your own room, a garden view." The words hung between us like damp air. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. A retirement place I managed. "Evan, my home?" he interrupted softly. "You'd still have access to everything you need." "Mom, but you can't live alone forever." Paige smiled thinly. "Exactly. You've done so much for us. Now let us take care of you. All we need is your signature." I looked down at the pen she'd placed neatly beside my plate. The weight of it seemed enormous. The restaurant's music faded into a low hum, and all I could hear was my own pulse. When I didn't move, Paige's smile tightened. "If you're having trouble understanding the documents, we can arrange for an evaluation. It's standard when mental capacity comes into question." Evan flinched, but said nothing. For the first time in years, the space between us felt final. I folded my hands in my lap to stop their trembling and stared at the papers, realizing this wasn't dinner. It was a quiet dispossession, dressed up as concern. Paige's words blurred as she continued to explain the papers, but my thoughts had already slipped somewhere else, back to the quiet years no one ever asked about. After my husband, Henry, died in that rain-slick car crash outside Somerville, there had been no one left to steady the ground under my feet. Evan was only 10. I took every job I could, sewing curtains for a hotel, mending uniforms for a cleaning service, even ironing linen for a restaurant that could never afford to tip. At night, when Evan was asleep, I sat by the kitchen window with a small lamp and my old Singer machine, the one that rattled like a heartbeat. I told him we were fine, that his father's insurance would last, that everything was taken care of. But it hadn't lasted long, not after hospital bills and funeral costs. What saved me wasn't luck or help from family. It was the foreclosure listings I found tucked into the back of the local paper. Back then, houses in North Charleston were selling for less than old cars. I bought one, then another, always under my maiden name, Miriam Hale, to keep them separate from Henry's debts. I cleaned them myself, painted the walls, rented to young couples just starting out. Nothing fancy, but steady. When the paperwork grew too complicated, I turned to William Price, an old friend of Henry's who'd gone into law. He had a quiet manner and a sharp eye. The first time I met him after Henry's funeral, he'd said, "You're stronger than you think, Miriam. Just don't let them know it yet." He'd smiled then, kind but knowing. For 20 years, William managed my deeds and accounts. He never spoke of it to anyone, not even when Evan began showing off the new car Paige had picked out on credit. Paige was still talking now, her voice smooth and certain, describing how I could sign with trust. Evan's face looked pale under the soft restaurant lighting. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I reached for my water glass to steady my hand. Beneath the tablecloth, I slid my phone from my purse. The screen glowed faintly against the linen. My fingers moved on instinct, typing a single message I'd never imagined needing to send William. Cancel everything. When I set the phone down again, Paige was still speaking. The waiter came to refill my glass, his eyes flicking briefly toward me with a trace of pity. I nodded a thank you, my smile small but steady. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not fear, but the quiet weight of certainty. I had spent decades building a life from scraps. Thread by thread. They thought they could unravel it with a pen. I folded my napkin, laid my hands flat on the table, and waited. The tide outside was turning. By dessert, Paige's confidence had turned brittle. Her laughter came too fast, her words too bright. Evan checked his phone every few minutes, pretending to glance at messages. Though his jaw had begun to tighten, then it started. A sharp buzz, followed by another. The light from his screen flickered against the wine glass. His face paled as he scrolled through the notifications bank alerts. Transaction failures. Something about account access restricted. What's wrong? Paige asked, her voice half a whisper. Probably a glitch, he muttered, tapping furiously. But the color drained from his cheeks. He tried another card. The waiter returned a minute later, politely murmuring, "I'm sorry, sir, it's been declined." Paige gave a small, nervous laugh. "That can't be right. Try mine." The machine beeped again, denied. The laughter died in her throat. She reached for another card, then another. Each time, the sound repeated, cold, mechanical, final, around us. The restaurant buzzed with quiet discomfort. Diners pretended not to notice. Forks pausing midair. I sat still, my hands folded neatly beside the empty glass of water, the badge on my chest. Limited guest caught the light one last time. I slipped it off, laid it beside my plate, and reached into my purse. The sound of their panicked whispers filled the air as I placed 3 folded bills on the table. "Here's for my water," I said softly. Paige's eyes darted up, confusion flickering into fear. "I should go," I added, rising from the table. "You two seem busy." The waiter stepped aside, opening a path as I walked toward the door. Behind me, voices rose, Evan's sharp, Paige's desperate, while the restaurant's soft jazz played on, untouched by their unraveling. Outside, the night air smelled of salt and rain. I straightened my coat and walked into it, calm as the tide. By morning, the satisfaction from the night before had settled into a strange stillness. I met William at a small cafe near Broad Street, the same one where we'd signed our first deed nearly 20 years ago. He arrived early, as he always did, his leather briefcase resting neatly beside him. "Good morning, Miriam," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "You've stirred quite the storm." I smiled faintly. I didn't stir it. William. I just stopped pretending the water was still. He opened a thin folder, eyes narrowing as he scanned the documents. Evan's company, Langley Financial, is being audited. The investigation started weeks ago, but after last night's account freezes, everything accelerated. They've been moving funds through shell entities, risky, poorly disguised. My stomach tightened, and Paige Williams sighed, worse. She listed one of your Charleston properties, the Riverbend duplex, as collateral for a loan she never intended to repay. "We only found it because your ownership was under your maiden name. That separation saved you." I stared at the sunlight spilling across the table, the scent of roasted coffee cutting through the weight of his words. He leaned closer, voice lowering. It's not just financial misconduct anymore, Miriam. It's insurance fraud. They inflated policies, filed false claims under your late husband's estate. That crosses into criminal territory. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. All those years of giving, of quiet patience, had led to this, to finding my own blood tangled in deceit that could destroy them. William watched me closely. Do you want to press charges? I shook my head slowly. Not yet. He nodded once, understanding more than I said. Then he closed the folder and whispered, patience. Then, the truth is already working. Outside, the church bells began to toll. Measured, inevitable. Friday afternoon, the schoolyard shimmered with the heat of early spring. Children spilled out in noisy waves, their backpacks bouncing, their laughter slicing through the hum of cars and cicadas. Then I saw her Lila, her braids slightly crooked, her pink sneakers scuffed at the toes. When she spotted me, she broke into a run, her voice carrying across the lot. Grandma. I knelt as she threw her arms around my neck, her small body warm against my chest. I missed you, sweetheart, I whispered. Mommy said you can't take care of yourself anymore, she said matter-of-factly, her eyes searching mine with childlike worry. That's why I don't see you much. The words stung, but I only smiled, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Oh, honey, sometimes grown-ups say things they don't really mean. How about we make cookies this weekend and prove I still know how to take care of a kitchen? She giggled, instantly convinced. I took her hand and led her to the car. The drive back to my house was quiet, peaceful. Lila hummed to herself, watching the marshlands roll by, while I felt the weight of every choice pressing behind the wheel. On the passenger seat, inside my leather purse, were the documents William had drawn up, temporary guardianship papers signed and sealed 2 days ago. Lila leaned her head against the window and whispered, I wish I could stay with you longer. Grandma, it's calm here. My throat tightened, but I managed a soft laugh. Then it settled. I said, you'll stay for the weekend. As we crossed the bridge toward the quiet side of town, the sunlight stretched long over the river. For the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel like fear. It felt like purpose. It was well past midnight when the pounding began. At first, I thought it was thunder rolling in from the harbor, but the rhythm was too human angry. Uneven, Lila stirred in the guest room upstairs, murmuring something in her sleep. I rose quietly, tightening my robe around me, and moved toward the front hallway. The knocks came again, louder this time. Mom Evan's voice cracked through the door. Open up. We need to talk. Behind him, Paige's shrill cry echoed through the night. You can't hide in there, Miriam. You ruined us. I stood a few feet from the door, my pulse steady but cold. Through the narrow glass pane, I could see them. Paige barefoot, her makeup streaked, Evan clutching his phone like a lifeline. Their car was parked crookedly by the curb, headlights still on, the engine running. Mom, please. Evan's tone shifted from rage to pleading. They froze everything. The house, the accounts, it's all gone. They said it was fraud. They said he stopped when Paige shoved him aside, her voice splintering. This is your fault. You and your precious little secrets. I spoke through the wood, my voice quiet but firm. You should go home, both of you. It's late. Paige hit the door with her palm. We don't have a home. Before I could answer, distant sirens began to rise, growing closer by the second. I had called William hours earlier when I suspected this might come. His office had already notified local authorities about the harassment and the pending investigations. Blue lights washed over the porch windows. 2 patrol cars pulled up, tires crunching against the gravel. Officers stepped out, voices calm but authoritative. Mr. and Mrs. Langley, one of them said. "You need to step away from the property. There's an active investigation." Evan's shoulders sagged. Paige froze, her rage collapsing into disbelief. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, hand resting on the latch, listening as their voices faded under the sound of official words measured, final, upstairs. Lila slept peacefully through it all. 3 days later, Charleston's air felt heavier, as if the whole city knew something had finally broken. The headlines didn't use their names, but I recognized the story instantly. Financial misconduct, forged signatures, fraudulent collateral. By the time the investigators came to take my statement, the truth had already begun to swallow them whole. Evan arrived first to the hearing, his face drawn and pale, the confidence long drained from his eyes. He wouldn't look at me. "Mom," he whispered when we crossed paths in the hallway. I didn't know she'd gone that far. It was Paige's idea. I just wanted to help. Paige appeared moments later, escorted by her attorney, her composure brittle but intact. When she saw Evan, she hissed, "You signed too. Don't you dare put this on me." Their words blurred together, accusations dressed as apologies. I said nothing. The court clerk led me into a small conference room, where I gave my testimony once, quietly, fact by fact. I didn't raise my voice or let it tremble. The truth was weight enough. William stood nearby, silent as ever, handing over the files we'd kept locked for years. By the end of the week, the verdicts came swiftly: asset seizure, restitution, multiple charges under federal review. Their house was repossessed, the cars towed, the accounts emptied to pay what could be recovered. Charleston moved on as it always did, its tides carrying the wreckage out to sea. I withdrew from the noise, closing my front gate to reporters and curious neighbors. Some nights I still heard the echo of Paige's fists against my door, but it no longer frightened me. Justice hadn't come with triumph. It came quietly, like a tide receding, leaving space for the shore to breathe again. Months later, the air along Charleston Harbor smelled of salt and jasmine. The city had settled into its rhythm again, boats drifting past, gulls circling lazily above the water. Lila skipped a few steps ahead of me, her laughter carried by the wind. She was taller now, more confident, the kind of light that grows in the safety of love. We stopped by the new office on East Bay Street, its sign gleaming softly in the late afternoon sun. The Harbor Light Trust. Inside, volunteers sorted papers and greeted elderly clients with patient smiles. The foundation had grown faster than I expected, offering free legal help to seniors who had been tricked or coerced by their families. Every story felt like a small tide turning back toward justice. On my desk, beneath a brass lamp, sat a framed memento, the plastic badge that once read, "Limited Guest." It had become less of a scar and more of a compass, reminding me how silence could turn into strength when met with truth. A letter from Evan arrived last week. The last line read, "I finally understand what respect means." I folded it neatly, placed it in the drawer, and turned toward the window, where Lila's reflection smiled beside mine. 2 lives, steady and unbroken, facing the light.